Jasmine Crockett said something Bondi wasn't expecting. Everyone in that room expected a fight. Jasmine Crockett and Pam Bondi in the same hearing room at the same table with 5 minutes on the clock. The tension was visible before a single word was spoken. Staffers were leaning in. Committee members were watching. The cameras were ready. What nobody expected was how it actually unfolded. Because Crockett didn't come to fight. She came with something far more dangerous than a confrontation. She came with a question that Bondi had no prepared answer for. And the moment it landed, the moment Bondi realized what was actually being asked, the entire dynamic of the hearing shifted. This is what happened, and why the exchange matters well beyond the moment itself. To understand the weight of what Crockett did, you need to understand the setup. Pam Bondi had been navigating this hearing with the practiced confidence of someone who has testified before Congress before. She knew the rhythm. She knew how to run out the clock on hostile questions. She knew which lines of questioning to engage, and which ones to redirect into safer territory. The members who had gone before Crockett had largely followed predictable patterns. Policy questions, oversight questions, questions about specific cases and specific decisions that Bondi had clearly been briefed to handle. She had handled them smoothly for the most part. Then Crockett's turn came. Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas is a former defense attorney. Before Congress, she spent years in courtrooms. She knows what a prepared witness looks like. She knows the difference between someone who is answering a question and someone who is performing an answer. She had been watching Bondi perform for the better part of an hour, and she had identified something. A gap. Not in the policy, not in the talking points. A gap between what Bondi had said earlier in the hearing and what the documentary record actually showed. Most members would have flagged it as an inconsistency and moved on. She built her entire 5 minutes around it. Not aggressively, methodically, the way a defense attorney builds a cross-examination, question by question, piece by piece, until the witness is standing on ground that no longer supports them. She started simply. She asked Bondi to confirm something she had said earlier in the hearing, a specific characterization of a specific policy decision. Bondi confirmed it without hesitation. Then Crockett asked her to confirm a second thing, also seemingly straightforward, also confirmed. Then a third. Each confirmation was a brick, and Crockett was building something. By the fourth question, a few members of the committee had begun to sense where this was going. You could see it in the room. The slight forward lean, the pens put down, the side conversations stopping. Bondi hadn't sensed it yet, or if she had, she didn't show it. Then Crockett said it. She placed a document on the table in front of her. She didn't hold it up. She didn't announce it dramatically. She simply placed it there, referenced it by its document number, and said, "Attorney General Bondi, I have here a memo dated 8 weeks ago from your own office, your office, that directly contradicts each of the 4 things you just confirmed to this committee." The room went still. This memo states in writing that the policy you just described as consistent with department guidelines was internally flagged by your own senior staff as, and I'm quoting directly here, potentially inconsistent with established departmental protocol and requiring further legal review before implementation. She looked up from the document. You just told this committee that policy was consistent with guidelines. Your own office told your own staff it might not be. Which one is true? Bondi looked at her counsel. Not briefly this time. Long enough for the cameras to catch it. Long enough for the room to feel it. Then she looked back at Crockett. I'd need to review the specific memo you're referencing before I could respond to its characterization. Crockett nodded. She had expected this. I'd be happy to provide it, but I want to be clear about what's happening here. You confirmed 4 statements to this committee. I have a document from your own office that calls each of those statements into question, and your response is that you need to review the document. She paused. This memo came from your office, Attorney General. It was authored by your senior staff. It was addressed to your deputy. At what point did the position your own office flagged for legal review become the policy you just confidently confirmed to this committee? No clean answer came. What followed was a 90-second exchange that legal observers watching in real time described as one of the more precise dismantlings of a prepared witness they had seen in a congressional hearing in recent memory. Not because Crockett raised her voice, she didn't. Not because she made accusations, she didn't do that either. But because she had done something that very few members of Congress do effectively in an oversight hearing. She had used the witness's own office's own documents to contradict the witness's own testimony. That is not a political move. That is a legal move. And it left Bondi in a position that no amount of preparation could have fully anticipated. Because the contradiction didn't come from an opponent. It came from inside her own department. The memo Crockett referenced had not been publicly available before the hearing. It had been obtained through a formal document request submitted by the committee 6 weeks earlier. A request that had been partially fulfilled after a lengthy delay. The delay itself had drawn criticism. Committee members had noted at the time that the pace of document production from the Department of Justice had been, in their words, inconsistent with the committee's oversight mandate. What no one outside the committee knew was what was in the documents that had finally been produced. Now they knew. A memo from Bondi's own senior staff, flagging a legal concern about a policy that Bondi had just described, under oath, as fully consistent with department guidelines. The gap between those two things is not a policy disagreement. It is a factual contradiction, and it is now on the congressional record. After the hearing, Crockett spoke briefly with reporters in the hallway. She was measured, precise, the way she had been in the hearing room. We asked questions, we got answers, we had documents that raised concerns about those answers. We put that on the record. The committee will determine what happens next. No prediction, no accusation, no theater, just the record. And the record now shows something that the Department of Justice will need to account for. Not to the press, not to political opponents, but to the committee that has constitutional oversight authority over it. There is a pattern worth noting across these hearings. The moments that matter most are rarely the loudest ones. They're the moments where someone has done the work, where the documents have been obtained, read, cross-referenced, and built into a sequence of questions that lead somewhere the witness cannot escape cleanly. Jasmine Crockett did that work. She came into that room not with a script designed for television, but with a legal strategy designed for the record. And Pam Bondi, prepared for a fight, ready for the familiar rhythms of a hostile congressional exchange, wasn't ready for that. She wasn't ready for a former defense attorney who had read her own office's own memo and built 5 minutes of questioning around the gap between what that memo said and what Bondi was about to tell Congress. That gap is now documented, permanent, part of the record. Jasmine Crockett said something Bondi wasn't expecting. Not an accusation, not an attack, not a viral moment built for the cameras. A question backed by a document from Bondi's own office, contradicting Bondi's own testimony. And the answer that came back, hesitant, redirected, counsel-dependent, told the committee everything they needed to know. The follow-up requests are already being drafted. The document production deadline has already been set. And the gap between what Bondi said in that room and what her own staff put in writing 8 weeks ago is now the center of an investigation that just got significantly more serious. This hearing was not the end of something. It was the moment the ground shifted.